Welcome to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. People's Bank and Trust proud to bring you this stream on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com's Facebook and WTIM TV YouTube. They put people first. Along with Landmark and Taylorville, you always do better with Landmark. I'm here in studio with U.S. Congress candidate for the Illinois District 13, Matt Hausman. Great to have you here, Mr. Hausman.
Thanks for having me, Avery.
So tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, goodness, I think the first thing that stands out is you studied to astronaut. It looks like you have studied to become an astronaut almost.
Well, that's what the original goal was. So growing up, my version of the American dream was to become an astronaut. So I went to the University of Illinois to study aerospace engineering. But a little bit of a roadblock was that I'm 6'7", and that's 2 inches too tall to be an astronaut.
No kidding. I didn't know there was a height limit for astronauts.
There is. It's definitely because you have to design the spacecraft.
Interesting.
But I still wanted to work in the space industry, so stuck with aerospace engineering, and eventually started working for Boeing. So a little bit different going from farm in East Central Illinois to Los Angeles, working on satellites for Boeing, and that was incredible. And got to do a lot of great work. Got to work on classified programs, so help with that and try to make a difference. And then I wanted to give back since I got to have so many opportunities and live my version of the dream. I started to go into education and became a high school teacher and taught government and economics at a low-income charter school in East Los Angeles. Did that for a few years, and then had the opportunity and joined SpaceX, which was the creme de la creme. If you wanted to work in space, SpaceX was the cutting edge, and got to see amazing things there. And then while I was doing that, I also wanted to still give back and work in nonprofit. So I got a certificate in nonprofit management and had an opportunity to go down to Colombia and work with the YMCA in Colombia for a while, and then spent a year after that traveling around the world doing different nonprofit and volunteer work, and decided it was time to come home. So came home about 4 years ago and working on the family farm, and also doing nonprofit work. I've been running a nonprofit called Feeding Our Kids over in Champaign for the last 3 years.
Where is home?
Home is Posodum. So
okay.
Little town, 15 miles south of Posodum, or 15 miles south of Champaign.
Gotcha. Okay. And tell me a little bit more about your nonprofit.
So Feeding Our Kids was founded back in 2013 by two Champaign mothers who basically the story was that they were chaperoning a trip, and one of the children came with the boxed lunch and said, "Hey, could you hold on to part of this for me?" And said, "Okay, sure, but why?" "Well, we don't have a whole lot of food, and I want to bring some of this home for my siblings." And so obviously that touched them, and so they founded this program, and we provide weekend food bags to hungry children, and we serve about 1,000 kids all across Champaign County.
You also spent time, you mentioned you got into education and spent time as an economics teacher and also a varsity basketball coach. How was that experience?
So that was fun. So obviously being 6'7", I did play basketball, but the 6'7" was the extent of my talent. So I tried to walk on at the U of I, but that didn't work out. So I started coaching actually at my old high school and wanted to get back into it. And so when I started teaching in East Los Angeles, they had just started their basketball program. It was a charter school, so they just started it the year before, or maybe 2 years before I got there, and got to work with a bunch of kids who had never played really organized basketball before, which was kind of different from me growing up playing youth basketball. And so we definitely had to work on some fundamentals and get them squared away. But it was great, and seeing the improvement when I left eventually, because when I started my first year, we didn't win a single game. And we went from that, the fourth year I was there, we were competing for the league, the division league championship, and made it to the playoffs. And seeing the younger kids who were so devastated when we lost in those playoffs, not realizing how far we'd come. So seeing how much the culture had shifted to having success. So that was something to be proud of. But more than that, what really made me proud was seeing them grow as men. And I remember one time where we were in a game, really intense game, and our point guard kind of had a hard foul on a fast break and knocked the other player over. And our players got on our point guard to say, "Hey, help him back up." And so that they really had a lot of character. And that was what I loved to see develop in those kids.
What other kind of projects or organizations do you serve on that you feel help you stand out?
So one is I am on the Champaign County Mental Health Board. So that's a political appointment. I was appointed by the county executive and approved by the county board early last year, and been serving on that for a little over a year now. And that gives me great insight, especially with crime and law enforcement being so critical and such a big issue right now. We just went through or we're going through our funding request for the next couple of years. We've been doing that in the last couple of meetings. And that's one of the applications I've been looking at a lot, are the crisis response teams, and helping bring together law enforcement and mental health providers. I was actually just talking with somebody last night over in the Metro East area, the other part of the district, who is a corrections officer. And it's sad that our biggest mental health provider is our jail system. He was telling me a story, and this isn't talking about making victims out of criminals. These are actual mental health patients that are stuck. He was telling the story of one person who went into a grocery store, was talking to himself, picked up cookies and milk, sat down on the floor in the grocery store, started eating and muttering to himself. So they called the police. He ended up spending 6 months in the county jail. He wasn't really a threat to anyone. He needed help, but that's just what our resources are, unfortunately. And that's one of the things that I think my experience on the mental health board and seeing these issues and working with these kind of providers and law enforcement can help, because we need mental health professionals dealing with those issues. And then that way our law enforcement can focus on keeping our streets safe.
Let's go into, by the way, that's U.S. Congress candidate for Illinois District 13, Matt Hausman. Mr. Hausman, you in the last 5-6 minutes or so have spoke a little bit or a lot about the American dream. What is your idea of the American dream?
My idea, as I said, was going into space, but that's the thing, that the American dream, the individual can live out their opportunity, whatever that is. For me, it was going to space. Other people, my dad's was to be a farmer. He wanted to take over the family farm. That was his goal throughout his life, and raise a family. Other people have different ones. They want to start a business. Other people, it's the white picket fence, 2.4 kids and a dog. But we need, as a country, to build that opportunity and make sure the environment is such so people can live out whatever version of the American dream they may have.
Right. And that's ultimately the goal, to be able to do it without restriction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless you're 6'7", and then you have there's laws of physics versus laws of man.
Well, space tourism could become a thing here in the next 20 years. Maybe you'll have your chance in that.
Maybe.
Way.
Hopefully they can loosen that restriction a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So, we are running up against the break, so I don't want to go into too much depth, but what are some of the things that you're focused on as a whole? Maybe just a general overview, and then we can dive into those subjects.
The big general overview and why I got into running is the vitriol that we have in the hyperpartisanship. Is I want to bridge that. I am somebody who has great friends who are very conservative and very liberal, and I can talk to anyone about and have a respectful conversation. So that's kind of the big overarching thing that I want to bring into politics, is changing the tenor.
That is U.S. Congress candidate for Illinois District 13, Matt Hausman, here on the WTIM Morning Show. More from Mr. Hausman after this, right here on WTIM, your information station. The stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first. Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Mark of Taylorville, proud to bring you this stream on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com, the Facebook page, and WTIM TV YouTube. Landmark of Taylorville, you always do better with Landmark and People's Bank and Trust. They put people first. I'm here in studio with U.S. Congress candidate for Illinois District 13, Matt Hausman. Great to have you here, Mr. Hausman.
Thank you very much, Avery.
So we talked a little bit during the break about the district you're running in, and goodness, so much has happened with those district maps, and it's kind of confusing about where exactly you're running. Let's clarify something really quick. I'm just going to put it out there. You are not running against Rodney Davis. This is his old seat.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you talked about how crazy the districts are.
Oh, my goodness.
So yes, actually this 13th district has been named, I think, one of the top 3 most gerrymandered districts in the country.
Wow.
So yes, it was drawn basically to cut out Rodney. So Rodney's seat is now the more rural areas in central Illinois, where he's running in the 15th district. The 13th basically runs from Champaign-Urbana, where I'm from, across along I-72 through Decatur, Springfield, and then goes down to the Metro East area. So it's a very skinny, and so it splits up a lot of the previous 13th district. So a lot of people are confused if they're in Rodney's district or this one, which is an open seat now because Rodney is running in the other district. So if anyone's curious about this, if you go to my website, hausmanforcongress.com, the spelling is Hausman forcongress.com. We actually have a voter info button, which will show the map. You can plug in your address and see which district you're in. And it also gives voter information as far as polling locations, registration deadlines, and all that is all going to be on that on our website.
That button is at the top right-hand corner of the website for your information. So, speaking of Rodney, too, you mentioned to me before the break about how one of your biggest goals for when you are, if you're elected to Congress, is you want to be able to breach that partisan gap that is in the nation's capital right now. And you mentioned to me about a little bit about how Rodney Davis, you kind of admire the way he navigates DC.
Yeah,
a little bit more about that.
So Rodney, we actually had a question in a forum about if you're elected to Congress, who would you like as a mentor? And I had said Rodney Davis would be one that I would want as a mentor because he's already represented most of this district, so he knows everyone. Not only that, he's constantly in the top 10 most bipartisan representatives. I believe he's number 4 now in the most recent rankings. And that's what we need, especially in this 13th district. As I said, it was drawn to favor Democrats. So it's a Democrat plus 10, more or less, roughly, district. So if I go to Congress, I want to represent all of that district, not just the Republicans, who I'm running as a Republican, but I want to represent everyone. And so that's going to need somebody to reach across the aisle and say, hey, what can I do for you? Even if you might not have voted for me, I still want to represent you. And that might include working with Democrats to get certain things done.
What would you say is the outside of the dynamic of the Capitol right now, which, goodness, is going to take a lot more than only one candidate.
Right.
It's going to take a whole village. But what would you say is the number one thing that you want to be able to accomplish? Or maybe if there's not maybe a number one, maybe there's a committee or some sort that you'd like to serve on.
So one of the big things that's going to impact, especially this community, that's going to come up in the next Congress is the reauthorization of the Farm Bill. And so obviously Central Illinois, that's going to be a huge thing coming up in this next Congress that I want to be involved in. One, being a farm kid, growing up on the family farm, so I already have that connection, having that involvement and knowing what's going on there. The other thing that a lot of people might not realize is that the Farm Bill, 2/3 of it roughly, actually goes to nutrition programs. And so having that background working for feeding our kids gives me a little bit of background and knowledge into the issue of food insecurity, that I understand that 1 in 5 children face food insecurity in this area. And that's a lot of the reason why you have a lot of Democrats and urban politicians serving and working on the Farm Bill because they're worried about the SNAP and the nutrition programs. And so that's another method or another area where I can reach across the aisle and say, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I've dealt with this issue. And so that's all going to be a big part, because the Farm Bill is a huge opportunity for bipartisanship and getting things done that's going to impact everyday Americans.
You know, you're running as a Republican, but at the same time, it almost feels like you're not just a Republican. You know what I mean? Obviously you're not a Democrat, but feels like you really are working in the name of bipartisanship here.
Right. That's actually how this came about. So for the last couple of years, I've been working with groups. For example, one of them is called Braver Angels, if you haven't heard of this. It was founded in the aftermath of the 2016 election, where they brought a bunch of Trump voters and Hillary voters together for a weekend and had kind of a little powwow workshop kind of thing. One of the founders was a marriage and family counselor, because that's how they kind of figured this is what we're kind of dealing with.
Yeah, that dynamic is pretty similar.
So that started in Ohio, and then it grew nationwide. And I'm actually a co-founder of a chapter here over in Champaign area. So it's just Champaign County people right now. And I was actually on a Zoom call for more statewide people. And they said one of them had been a candidate for a mayor somewhere up north. And she said the vitriol was just so bad, she couldn't put her family through it and decided to get out of the race.
Wow. Yeah.
And she said, I wish somebody who would be willing to stand up and try to bring people together would run for office. And I'm single, don't have a family yet, would like to at some point. But as of now, I have that opportunity where, okay, you know what? Somebody has to stand up. I can't just let somebody else, I can't wait for someone else to try to do something, because if everyone's just waiting, it never gets done.
Yeah. We got to go here. What's the one message you want people to know about as you leave them?
That I'm going to work for everyone. I'm going to try to bring people together. And so if you're interested in this, I encourage you to go to my website, hausmanforcongress.com. Again, that's HAUSMAN, and help us try to restore the American dream for everyone.
That is candidate Matt Hausman.
Hopefully there was a Freudian slip there.
Hopefully, Congressman, you're on the WTIM morning show. Thank you, Congress.